You have 72 hours to pay this $15,000 fine for excessive water usage, or we're placing a lien on your property. Vivienne Blackwood handed me that notice with the kind of smile you see on people who think they've already won. Her French manicure tapping against the manila envelope like a judge's gavel. That expensive perfume she wore, choking the clean mountain air around my porch. I looked at the citation, then at the 200 homes in Willowbrook Estates Valley below, their sprinkler systems painting rainbows in the morning sun, their decorative fountains, their emerald green lawns in the middle of Colorado's worst drought in 50 years, all running on my water. "Ma'am," I said, setting down my coffee mug on the porch railing my grandfather built with his own hands in 1967. "Do you know what a hydraulic engineer does?" She blinked, confused, like I'd just spoken Mandarin. "We manage water systems, underground aquifers, illegal taps, resource theft." I smiled, watching comprehension start to dawn, like a slow-motion car crash on her Botoxed face. "And I've been documenting your neighborhood's unauthorized connection to my private well for 15 years, 4 months, and 17 days. The manila envelope slipped from her fingers. "That's 847 million gallons of stolen water. At current commercial rates, your HOA owes me $2,347,892, plus interest, plus punitive damages, plus federal water theft penalties." I picked up my coffee and took a long sip. "So about that $15,000 fine? Yeah, I don't think so. What would you do if someone fined you for using your own water while they'd been stealing millions of gallons? Drop your state in the comments because this water war is about to get federal, and Karen's designer heels are about to meet a courtroom floor. Let me back up and tell you how the most powerful HOA president in Colorado ended up facing felony water theft charges because she messed with the wrong retired engineer. My name is Garrett Stone, and 61 years of living have taught me 3 things. Patience beats anger every time, documentation beats memory in court, and people who steal water eventually drown in their own arrogance. 3 months ago, life was exactly how I wanted it. I'm talking mornings that start with the smell of strong coffee brewing in my grandfather's dented percolator, the kind that makes that satisfying bubbling sound that's been waking up stonemen since 1967. My border collie Luna would pad across the worn wooden floors, her nails clicking a familiar rhythm, while I'd stand on this same porch, watching the sun paint the Rockies gold and pink like God's own watercolor. 40 acres of Colorado heaven. That's what my grandfather Jackson Stone bought in 1964 with his GI Bill money after Korea left him with shrapnel in his leg and a need for peace that only mountain air could satisfy. The smell of alfalfa from the south pasture, diesel fuel from the old John Deere tractor, and the sweet mineral scent of pure well water. That's the perfume of honest work, not whatever chemical nightmare Vivienne Blackwood bathes in. Grandpa Jackson was a smart man, smarter than folks gave him credit for. When he bought this land, he didn't just buy dirt and rocks, he bought water rights. In 1967, he drilled down 340 feet through Colorado limestone, hitting an aquifer so pure the state water board called it the sweetest strike in 3 counties. That well produced 47 gallons per minute of crystal clear spring water, cold enough to hurt your teeth and clean enough to bottle without treatment. I inherited this place when Grandpa passed in 2003, and my wife Sarah and I moved up from Denver, trading my corporate engineering job for something simpler. We raised chickens, grew vegetables in the greenhouse Grandpa built. Sarah made the best peach preserves you ever tasted from the orchard trees Grandpa planted in '69. Life was good, simple, honest. Then cancer took Sarah 4 years ago, leaving me with memories in every corner of this property and a need to keep her garden alive, because it felt like keeping part of her alive too. Her rose bushes still bloom every June, red as her favorite lipstick. I water them every morning with the same well water Grandpa struck, the same water that's been feeding this land for 58 years. That's when Willowbrook Estates arrived, 2009. Some developer named Richard Pemberton bought the valley land adjacent to my property, 200 acres of scrub brush and rocky soil that most folks wouldn't pay to bury a dog on. But Richard had vision, the kind of vision that involves bulldozers, million-dollar homes, and people who think rustic Colorado living means a house with exposed beams and a $90,000 kitchen. I watched those homes go up over 2 years. Massive things, all glass and steel trying to look like they belonged in mountains that had been here for millions of years. Each one averaging $1.2 million, packed with people escaping Denver's urban sprawl for weekend getaways and early retirements. Here's what I didn't know then. Their development permit application had listed a municipal water connection from Pinewood Springs, 12 miles east. That connection would cost Pemberton Development approximately $3.8 million in infrastructure, pipes, pumps, purification systems, county permits. Here's what I learned later. They never built it. In spring of 2009, while I was installing new irrigation for Sarah's expanded rose garden, I noticed something odd. The water pressure in my well had dropped about 8%. Not much. Most folks wouldn't even notice. But when you've been a hydraulic systems engineer for 35 years, you notice an 8% pressure drop, the same way a musician notices an out-of-tune guitar string. I ran tests. The aquifer recharge rate was stable. My usage hadn't increased. The well pump was functioning perfectly. The math didn't add up, which meant someone was taking water that wasn't theirs. So I did what engineers do. I investigated, followed my property lines with a metal detector and ground-penetrating radar I borrowed from my old firm. Found the tap 3 weeks later, buried 4 feet down, right where my property met Willowbrook Estates, a professional installation. 2-inch PVC mainline running straight into their development, complete with a pressure regulator and backflow preventer. They'd tapped my well like it was a public utility. Most people would have marched over and raised hell, called lawyers, called the sheriff. But I'd learned something important from 35 years of engineering work. Emotions lose court cases. Documentation wins them. So I documented everything. Installed flow meters on my well output. Calculated the baseline consumption for my property, my greenhouse, my livestock, my household use, Sarah's gardens. Everything else was theft. I photographed the illegal tap from 17 different angles. I pulled county records showing no easement, no right-of-way, no legal permission for any connection to my well. Then I waited, because good revenge isn't a fire, it's a flood. And floods take time to build. For 15 years, I watched Willowbrook Estates flourish on my water. Every sprinkler system, every decorative fountain, every emerald lawn that looked like a golf course fairway, every toilet, every shower, every dishwasher, every washing machine, all running on water, stolen from a 340-foot well that belonged to my family. I calculated their consumption monthly, 847 million gallons over 15 years. At commercial water rates for unmetered agricultural well water in Colorado, that came to $2,347,892. I kept spreadsheets. I photographed my flow meters monthly. I maintained a legal journal documenting pressure fluctuations. I even hired a private surveyor to confirm the tap's exact position on my property, 6 feet, 4 inches past the property line. Sarah knew. Before she passed, she'd asked me why I didn't just shut them down immediately. I told her the truth. Honey, the longer they steal, the bigger the bill. And eventually, they'll give me a reason to collect. That reason arrived 3 months ago, delivered by the devil herself in designer heels. Vivienne Blackwood. 53 years old, interior designer who'd moved to Willowbrook Estates 5 years ago, and immediately declared herself the community's aesthetic guardian angel. Picture a woman who measures her neighbor's grass with a ruler and considers exposed trash cans a crime against humanity. She drives a white BMW X7 with vanity plates reading Design Fi and dresses like she's perpetually on her way to intimidate a contractor. She'd been elected HOA president 2 years ago, running unopposed because nobody else wanted to volunteer for neighborhood Gestapo duty. Her specialty was weaponizing bylaws. Fence paint half a shade off approved colors, citation. Garden gnome visible from the street, violation. Kids chalk art on your own driveway? You better believe that's disturbing community aesthetics. But Vivienne made a critical error. She decided my 40-acre farm, the property that predated her precious development by 45 years, was an eyesore that damaged Willowbrook's property values. Her first attack came on a Tuesday morning in June. I'm watering Sarah's roses, the morning sun making the water droplets sparkle like diamonds, when I hear those sharp clicks of expensive heels on my gravel driveway. Luna's ears perked up, a low growl rumbling in her throat because dogs know evil when they smell it. "Mr. Stone," Vivienne's voice could strip paint. "We need to discuss your property's impact on community standards." I turned off the hose, watching water bead on rose petals, the color of Sarah's favorite summer dress. "Ma'am, I don't live in your community. This property's been here since 1964. She smiled that smile that never reaches the eyes. "Actually, your property borders Willowbrook Estates, which means you're subject to our covenant restrictions on visual blight. Your barn needs painting, your fencing is deteriorating, and that tractor is visible from Highway 34. That barn's older than you are, the fence works fine, and that tractor still runs." Nevertheless, she produced a citation from her designer bag like a lawyer serving divorce papers. "You have 30 days to address these violations or face daily fines of $500. I looked at that citation, then at this woman standing on my property without invitation, criticizing improvements my grandfather had built with his own scarred hands. The audacity tasted like copper in my mouth. "Ms. Blackwood, do you know what an easement is?" She blinked. "That's irrelevant to... Because you're standing on my private property without permission. That's trespassing, and you're attempting to enforce HOA covenants on land that's never been part of your development. That's harassment. So I suggest you leave before I call the county sheriff, who happens to be my cousin Tommy." The smile cracked, just a little, like ice over a deep lake. "Mr. Stone, I'm simply trying to maintain property values for..." "Get off my land." She left. But the war had started. Over the next month, citations appeared on my door like clockwork. Excessive water usage on my lawn, unsightly vegetation along my fence line, noise violations from my tractor at 7 a.m., each one more ridiculous than the last, each one carrying fines that added up faster than reasonable. But Vivienne wasn't satisfied with paper warfare. She escalated. Week 2, I found survey stakes hammered into my property, 20 feet past where Willowbrook Estates ended and my land began. Professional markers with orange flags, the kind land developers use before construction. I pulled them out, every single one, and stacked them in a neat pile on Vivienne's manicured doorstep with a note: "Trespassing is still illegal, even with survey equipment." The next morning, animal control showed up at 6:30 a.m., sirens wailing like I was running a pit bull fighting ring. Luna barked once, confused by the commotion, her tail wagging because she thought everyone was there to pet her. The officer, a young guy named Martinez who looked embarrassed before he even spoke, handed me a complaint form. "Sir, we received a report of aggressive dog behavior and livestock violations." I looked at Luna, who was currently rolling on her back hoping for belly rubs. "Aggressive dog behavior? The complaint says your border collie attacked a jogger yesterday morning." "Officer Martinez, I can show you security camera footage of my entire property from yesterday. Luna never left the porch except to pee on that cottonwood tree." I pointed to my camera system, visible on every barn corner. "Would you like to see the footage?" His shoulders relaxed. "No, sir. I believe you. This is the 4th false report Ms. Blackwood has filed this month. I'm documenting it as unfounded, and I'll be having a conversation with her about misuse of emergency services." After he left, I added his report to my growing file. Every false claim, every trespass, every harassment attempt, all documented, all dated, all photographed. Week 3 brought the health inspector. Apparently, my composting system was creating biohazard conditions. The inspector, a sharp-eyed woman named Chen, took one look at my professionally installed 3-bin composting setup and shook her head. "Mr. Stone, this is better than 90% of the commercial operations I inspect. Whoever reported this wasted taxpayer money." She paused, consulting her notes. "Report filed by Vivienne Blackwood. Yeah, that tracks. She called us about a restaurant last month because their dumpster was the wrong shade of green." Another document for the file. Week 4, the county building inspector arrived with a complaint about unpermitted structures. Vivienne claimed I'd built an illegal addition to my barn. The inspector, Tom Rodriguez, Patricia's husband as it turned out, walked my property with a tablet, comparing current structures to the original 1967 building permits. "Garrett, Everything here matches the permits filed in 67 and 82. Your grandfather built to code, and you've maintained it properly. This complaint is—" He searched for a professional word. Baseless. "Tom, can I show you something?" I led him to the illegal water tap, showed him the survey data, the photographs, the flow meter readings. His eyes widened with each document. "Jesus, Garrett, does Pat know about this?" "Not yet, but she will. I'm just waiting for the right moment." He nodded slowly. "Make it count. Women like Vivienne Blackwood don't learn lessons. They learn consequences." I ignored them all, kept my documentation, photographed every citation, every false report, every trespass. Because I knew what she didn't. The moment she pushed too hard, I'd push back with 15 years of evidence. That moment arrived on September 12th at 8:47 a.m., the moment Vivienne handed me that $15,000 citation for excessive water waste, while standing in front of my greenhouse where Sarah's roses climbed the south wall like they were reaching for heaven. "Excessive water waste," she'd said, tapping her manicured finger on the paper. "During a state drought emergency, your consumption is unconscionable. The HOA board voted unanimously to fine you $15,000, and if you don't pay within 72 hours, we'll pursue legal action for a lien." I looked at that citation, then at the valley below, where her Willowbrook estate sat pretty, 200 homes with sprinkler systems running at 6 a.m., decorative fountains flowing, lawns greener than Augusta National, all on my water. The irony was so perfect it hurt. This woman, whose entire neighborhood had been stealing my water for 15 years, was fining me for water waste. That's when I decided it was time to collect. "Ms. Blackwood," I said, setting down my coffee, "do you know what a hydraulic engineer does?" And I watched her world begin to crumble. After she left, after that envelope slipped from her shaking fingers and she scrambled back to her BMW like the devil was on her heels, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. Patricia Rodriguez, Colorado State Water Inspector, Division of Natural Resources. We'd worked together on the Front Range Pipeline project back in '09, and she owed me a favor for catching a design flaw that would have cost the state $14 million. "Pat, it's Garrett Stone. Remember that favor you owed me? Time to collect." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "What did they do, Garrett?" 15 years of felony water theft. Want to make the biggest case of your career? 48 hours later, Patricia was standing in my barn, reviewing 15 years of documentation, with the focused intensity of a prosecutor building a RICO case. Flow meter readings, consumption calculations, photographs of the illegal tap, survey reports, county records showing 0 easements, the complete paper trail of systematic water theft. The September afternoon sun streamed through the barn's western window, dust motes dancing in the light, while Pat flipped through binder after binder. The smell of old hay and leather tack mixed with the sharp scent of her peppermint coffee. She'd always drunk peppermint coffee, a quirk I'd forgotten until that moment. "Jesus, Garrett," she whispered, flipping through page after page. "This is felony-level resource theft. 847 million gallons. That's not a mistake. That's organized crime." She pulled out a calculator, her fingers flying across the keys. At current commercial agricultural rates, base cost $2.1 million. State resource theft penalties during drought emergency, that's triple damages. We're looking at $6.3 million in potential claims. I don't want to bankrupt families, Pat. Most of these people had no idea what was happening. She looked up, her dark eyes sharp with the kind of justice that comes from 30 years of catching water thieves. Then we go after the HOA as an organization and the people who knew. But, Garrett, you can't let this slide. Water theft during drought isn't shoplifting. It's a felony. It affects entire ecosystems, aquifer recharge rates, agricultural sustainability. What do you need from me? She stood, walking to the barn door where the valley spread below us. Willowbrook Estates sat pretty in the golden afternoon light, 200 homes with green lawns and glittering pools, all fed by water that wasn't theirs. I need you to let me document this officially. State surveyors, independent flow testing, forensic analysis of the tap installation. I need you to testify about your well's history and output capacity. And I need you to understand that once I file this case, it becomes criminal. The Attorney General's office will get involved. This won't be quiet. Good. I'm tired of quiet. Over the next 3 days, my property became a crime scene investigation without the yellow tape. State hydrologists tested my well capacity, 47.3 gallons per minute, exactly as Grandpa's 1967 report stated. Forensic engineers excavated the illegal tap, documenting the professional installation that must have cost Pemberton Development at least $50,000 to install. County surveyors confirmed the tap's position on my property, creating legal diagrams that would hold up in any court. Through it all, Vivienne watched from her deck with binoculars, probably trying to figure out what I was doing. Let her watch, let her worry. On day 3, Pat called me to her temporary office, my kitchen table, covered in documents and coffee mugs. Okay, here's what I've got. The illegal tap was installed March 17, 2009, based on the pipe manufacturing date and installation technique. Your well's natural flow supports approximately 15,000 gallons per day for your agricultural and domestic use. The illegal extraction has averaged 155,000 gallons per day over 15 years. That's 847,375,000 gallons total. She slid a spreadsheet across the table. The numbers were staggering. At commercial unmetered agricultural well rates, that's $1.83 per thousand gallons. Base theft cost, $1,550,696. Colorado statute adds treble damages for resource theft during drought emergency, $4,652,088, plus state administrative penalties, $247,500. Total liability before federal involvement, $4,899,588. I stared at the number, nearly $5 million. But, Pat continued, I talked to the AG's office. They want to make this about the HOA organization and the fraud, not the individual homeowners. So, we're recommending a settlement structure, $2,347,892 in direct restitution to you, which covers the base theft plus reasonable damages. The rest goes to state water conservation funds and penalties against Vivienne Blackwood and Richard Pemberton personally. Why the lower number for me? Because you're a decent human being who doesn't want to destroy families. But trust me, the total financial pain will be much higher. The AG is pursuing criminal charges. This is just the civil side. Can you shut them down? Can I shut them down? She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just the grim satisfaction of someone about to drop a legal hammer. Garrett, I can do better than that. I can invoice them for every single gallon, plus penalties. Colorado water law is crystal clear. Unauthorized extraction from a private well is theft of natural resources. Commercial restitution rates apply, plus state penalties, plus potential federal involvement since this crosses drought emergency statutes. She pulled out a timeline. Here's how this plays out. Tomorrow, I file the official state violation with the AG. Day after tomorrow, you get a cease and desist order to present to the HOA, legal authority to shut off your well from their illegal access. Then, on day 4, you shut the valve at exactly 6 a.m. Why 6 a.m.? Because that's when their automatic sprinkler systems activate. I want maximum visible impact. I want every sprinkler head sputtering, every fountain running dry, every toilet that won't flush. I want them to understand immediately that something catastrophic has happened. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. Then I show up at 8 a.m. with the sheriff and the AG's representative. We serve the HOA with the full documentation while they're in crisis mode, while they can see the consequences of their theft in real time. Psychological impact is important in cases like this. They need to feel the weight of what they did. How long? Give me 72 hours to process the paperwork. Then I'll need you to shut off their access at 6 a.m. on day 4. I want them to wake up dry. I want every toilet that won't flush, every sprinkler that won't spray, every fountain that runs empty. Maximum impact. Can you do that? I thought about Sarah's roses, blooming every June, because I watered them with care and love. About Grandpa Jackson drilling through 340 feet of limestone in 1967, striking water that tasted like hope. About 15 years of watching my pressure drop, my water stolen, my patience tested. about Vivienne's smug smile as she handed me that $15,000 citation, accusing me of wasting the very water she'd been stealing. I thought about the 4-year anniversary of Sarah's death, coming up in 2 weeks, about how she'd always said, "Patience is fine, Garrett, but at some point, you have to act." Yeah, I can do that. The night before shutdown day, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with Luna at my feet, watching the lights of Willowbrook Estates twinkle in the valley below. Sprinkler systems were running. I could see the spray in people's yard lights. Pools were glowing blue. Fountains were flowing. All on my water. For the last time. At 4:30 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Luna sensed something was happening, pacing the kitchen with nervous energy. "It's okay, girl," I told her, scratching behind her ears. "Today's the day we stop being stolen from." The morning of September the 16th started at 5:30 a.m. The sky was that perfect pre-dawn purple that makes the Rockies look painted by an artist who really understood his work. Luna followed me to the well house, her breath misting in the cool mountain air that smelled like dew on alfalfa and the distant scent of pine from the national forest. Inside the well house, the original shutoff valve Grandpa installed in '67 sat waiting. Solid brass, built to last 100 years, maintained perfectly, because I'd known this day would eventually come. The valve was cool under my hand, the metal solid and real. I'd maintained it perfectly, knowing this day would eventually come. My hand on that cold metal valve felt like shaking hands with justice itself. Before I turned it, I took a breath. Thought about Grandpa Jackson, who taught me that water was life, and stealing water was stealing life itself. Thought about Sarah, who'd watered her roses every morning with love and care. Thought about 15 years, 4 months, and 17 days of documented theft. I turned it clockwise, slow, steady. The valve resisted at first. It had been open for decades, then gave way with a metallic groan that sounded like a judge's gavel. I felt the pressure change immediately, felt 847 million gallons of stolen water stop flowing through pipes that had no right to carry it. The silence that followed was profound. For 15 years, I'd heard the faint hum of water pressure feeding that illegal tap. Now, nothing. Just the morning wind through the cottonwood trees and the distant call of a hawk announcing dawn. I walked back to my porch, poured fresh coffee from Grandpa's percolator, the familiar bubbling sound a comfort, and waited. Luna settled at my feet, sensing this was a watching morning. At 6 a.m., right on schedule, I heard the first automated sprinkler system activate, the mechanical click-click-click of timers engaging across the valley, a symphony of irrigation systems waking up. I could see them from my elevated porch, 200 homes, each with their programmed watering schedule, each expecting unlimited water. At 6:03 a.m., the first system sputtered. I heard it from half a mile away, the wet cough of a sprinkler head trying to spray water that wasn't there. Then another. Then another. Like dominoes falling across the valley, 200 automatic sprinkler systems gasped their last drops and went silent, their spray pattern dying mid-arc, leaving half-watered circles in the grass like crop circles of consequences. The decorative fountains took longer. At 6:15, I watched the first one sputter and die. The massive centerpiece fountain in the community park, the one that had run 24/7 for 15 years, shooting water 20 feet in the air, coughed 3 times, sprayed a weak 6 inches, and went still. The basin was still full, but nothing flowed. Dead water, stolen water that had reached the end of its theft. By 6:23, the entire valley had gone silent. No sprinkler hiss, no fountain splash. Just the morning birds, confused by the sudden quiet, singing louder than I'd heard in years. At 6:31, the first door opened. An elderly man in a bathrobe stood on his porch, staring at his silent sprinkler system like it had betrayed him. Then, another door. A woman in yoga clothes walked to her fountain, pressing buttons on the control panel. Nothing happened. At 6:47 a.m., I heard the first scream. A woman's voice, shrill with panic, cutting through the morning stillness. "The water's off. Nothing's working." Then car doors slamming, engines starting. The growing chaos of 200 households discovering their water was gone, sounded like a symphony composed by Karma herself, conducted by justice, performed by consequences. I sipped my coffee and watched. Watched people in bathrobes run to their neighbors. Watched them check street valves that had never existed. Watched the panic spread like wildfire through a valley that had built itself on stolen resources. By 7 a.m., my phone was ringing. I let it go to voicemail. 11 messages in 10 minutes, all from Willowbrook Estates residents whose contact information I'd never given, but who'd somehow found my number. The messages ranged from confused, "Mr. Stone, do you know why the water's off?" to angry, "This is your fault somehow," to desperate, "My kids need to shower for school." I deleted them all without responding. At 7:12 a.m., Vivienne's white BMW came flying up my driveway, spraying gravel like shrapnel. She didn't just park. She abandoned the car, door flung open, engine still running, her designer heels hitting my property at a near run. She exploded out of that car, her silk blouse already showing sweat stains because her air conditioning couldn't run without water circulation. Her perfect makeup starting to run in the morning heat that was already hitting 78 degrees and climbing. "What did you do?" The shriek could have shattered windows. "My toilets won't flush. My pool's draining. You sabotaged the community water supply. This is terrorism. I'm calling the sheriff. I'm calling the state. Ma'am." I took a slow sip of coffee. "I didn't sabotage anything. I just shut off my well. You know, the one you've been stealing from for 15 years, 4 months, and 17 days. The color drained from her face faster than water from her pool. You can't. You have rights to exactly nothing. This is my private well on my private property, and you've been committing felony theft of natural resources since 2009. But don't worry, the state water inspector is on her way. She'll explain everything." Patricia Rodriguez arrived at 7:58 a.m. in a white State of Colorado truck, accompanied by 2 county sheriff's deputies and a representative from the Attorney General's office. She had a briefcase full of documents and an expression that said she'd seen every kind of water theft in her 30-year career. But this one was special. Vivienne met them in my driveway, still demanding answers, still thinking her HOA president badge meant something in the real world. Patricia didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Ms. Blackwood, I'm Inspector Rodriguez with Colorado Water Resources. I'm here to serve Willowbrook Estates HOA with documentation of illegal water extraction from a private well." She handed Vivienne a folder. Thick. Official. The kind of folder that ends careers. Vivienne opened it. Her hands started shaking by page 2. By page 5, she'd gone pale. By page 10, she was looking for somewhere to sit down because her $800 heels weren't built for supporting a woman whose world was collapsing. This says we owe $2.3 million. That can't be legal. We didn't know." "Ignorance isn't a defense, ma'am. Your development's water infrastructure connects directly to Mr. Stone's private well via an illegal tap installed on his property in March 2009. Survey records confirm the tap's location 6 feet past the property line. Flow meter data shows 847 million gallons of unauthorized extraction over 15 years. At commercial agricultural water rates, plus state resource theft penalties, your HOA's total liability is $2,347,892. Patricia pulled out another document. Additionally, Colorado Statute 37-90-137 classifies unauthorized extraction from private wells during declared drought emergencies as a Class 4 felony. The Attorney General's office is prepared to pursue criminal charges unless full restitution is made within 90 days. Vivienne's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "We can't pay that. The HOA doesn't have that kind of money. This will bankrupt." "That's not Mr. Stone's problem, ma'am. That's yours." The deputies stepped forward, and Patricia handed them another document. "This is a cease and desist order preventing any reconnection to Mr. Stone's well. Violation of this order constitutes contempt of court and will result in immediate arrest." I stood there on my porch, coffee in hand, Luna sitting beside me, watching 15 years of patience pay off better than any lottery jackpot. The smell of Vivienne's expensive perfume mixed with the sweat of pure panic. The sound of her breathing fast and shallow. The sight of a bully realizing she'd picked on the wrong retired engineer. "But what about our water?" Her voice had gone from shrill to desperate. 200 homes, families, children. We need... Patricia's expression didn't soften. You should have thought of that before building a development on stolen water. I suggest you contact Pinewood Springs Municipal Water about that connection you were supposed to build in 2009. It'll cost approximately $4.20 million now, thanks to inflation. They're expecting your call. She turned to me. Mr. Stone, you're free to restore your well's full pressure for your own property use. Thank you for your cooperation with this investigation. I nodded. Appreciate you handling this, Pat. After they left, after Vivienne stumbled back to her BMW, after the state truck and sheriff's vehicles rolled down my driveway, I walked to the well house and opened my valve back up, full pressure. The sound of water rushing through my pipes sounded like freedom. The next 30 days were beautiful, not just because karma tastes sweet, but because watching a corrupt system collapse under its own weight reminds you that sometimes the universe does balance its books. Willowbrook Estates scrambled to find water. By September 17th, bottled water delivery trucks arrived every hour, lining up like military convoys. 5-gallon jugs stacked on porches. Residents carrying water buckets from their cars like refugees in a disaster zone. The sound of manual labor, buckets sloshing, people grunting with effort, replaced the automated luxury they'd taken for granted. Portable toilets appeared on September 18th. Bright blue porta-potties delivered by Pete's Sanitation. 1 unit for every 3 homes. They sat in front yards like monuments to hubris. Plastic sentinels reminding everyone what happens when you build a neighborhood on stolen water. I could see them from my porch. 200 houses, 67 porta-potties, all because Vivienne Blackwood thought she could find me for excessive water usage. The community pool became the shower facility on September 19th. The HOA opened it for hygiene access only, limiting residents to 10 minutes each. Lines formed at 6 a.m., people in bathrobes carrying towels and toiletries. The smell of chlorine mixed with desperation drifted up to my property on the morning breeze. Lawns that had been emerald green turned brown within a week, revealing the artificial nature of their Colorado golf course aesthetic. The contrast was stark. My 40 acres stayed green from my well running at normal pressure, while the valley below turned the color of drought and consequences. But the real chaos was happening behind closed doors. The HOA emergency meeting happened on September 23rd, held at the community center with standing room only. I didn't attend, but my cousin Tommy did, Sheriff Tommy Martinez, who wore his uniform and carried a file folder thick with every false report Vivienne had filed against me. He told me later what happened, sitting on my porch with a beer, his voice mixing satisfaction and disgust. Garrett, it was a bloodbath. 200 residents all demanding answers. Vivienne tried to run the meeting, but people weren't having it. First question, why do we have no water? She claimed it was your fault for shutting off your well. Second question, why were we using his well? Dead silence. She had no answer. Tommy took a long pull of his beer. That's when Jim Morrison stood up. You know Jim, retired accountant, meticulous as hell. He'd been going through HOA financial records for the past week. He brought printouts, Garrett, spreadsheets, 15 years of water infrastructure maintenance fees totaling $3.2 million. Except there was no water infrastructure to maintain because they'd been stealing from you. He leaned back, watching the sunset paint the valley gold. Jim asked where that $3.2 million went. Vivienne said infrastructure maintenance, repairs, system upgrades. Jim said, show me the invoices. She couldn't. Because there were no invoices. There was no infrastructure. The revelation triggered an audit. An independent forensic accountant named Sarah Chen, no relation to the health inspector, spent 3 weeks digging through HOA financial records. What she found made the water theft look simple. Vivienne's interior design firm had received $220,000 in consulting fees from the HOA budget over 5 years. For what? Nobody could say. The invoices were vague. Community aesthetic consultation, $4,500, or landscape design review, $6,200. No detailed work logs, no before and after photos. Just money flowing from the HOA to Vivienne's pocket. The original development permit, filed in 2008, listed a municipal water connection from Pinewood Springs Municipal. Cost $3.8 million. The HOA had paid Pemberton Development that full amount. documented in checks and wire transfers. But if they never built the connection, where did the money go? Sarah Chen found the answer in a series of shell companies. Pemberton Development had created Willowbrook Infrastructure LLC, which subcontracted to Mountain Water Solutions, which then outsourced to Pinewood Services. Each company took a cut. Each company was owned by either Richard Pemberton or Vivienne Blackwood or both. The $3.8 million water infrastructure money had been split between them. They'd pocketed roughly $2.9 million after creating enough paper trail to fool casual inspection. Then they'd built the houses on my stolen water, charging residents for water maintenance that didn't exist, and created a 15-year fraud scheme that would have continued forever if Vivienne hadn't gotten greedy and tried to fine me. I learned all this from Sarah Chen herself, who came to my property on October 2nd with a laptop full of evidence and an expression that said she'd seen financial crimes before, but never anything this brazen. "Mr. Stone," she said, settling into my porch chair with a coffee I'd offered, "I've been a forensic accountant for 23 years. I've investigated embezzlement, tax fraud, money laundering. She shook her head. "This is the most comprehensive theft I've ever documented. They didn't just steal your water, they built an entire subdivision's economy on stolen resources, then charged residents for the privilege of being accomplices without their knowledge." "How much total?" She pulled up a spreadsheet. "Water theft from you, $2.3 million minimum. Fraudulent infrastructure charges to homeowners, $3.8 million. Fake maintenance fees, $3.2 million. Vivienne's personal enrichment through bogus consulting, $220,000. Richard Pemberton's shell company profits, estimated $1.7 million. Conservative total, $11.24 million in fraud and theft." I whistled. "That's federal. That's very federal. I'm submitting my findings to the FBI's Denver field office today. This crosses state lines. Pemberton has properties in Wyoming and Utah. That makes it wire fraud, RICO potentially, organized criminal activity. The FBI arrived on October 3rd. Not one agent, 6. 3 black SUVs rolled into Willowbrook Estates at 6 a.m., a deliberate callback to the hour I'd shut off the water. They arrested Vivienne at her home, let her out in handcuffs while neighbors watched from windows. The perp walk was captured by 3 different Ring doorbells and went viral on the community Facebook page within an hour. Richard Pemberton was arrested the same morning at his Denver office, along with 2 associates who'd helped create the shell companies. The FBI also seized computers, filed documents, bank records, everything they needed to build a case that would make this fraud scheme a cautionary tale in white-collar crime textbooks. The federal charges read like a crime novel when they were unsealed 2 weeks later. Wire fraud, mail fraud, theft of natural resources during emergency conditions, criminal conspiracy, money laundering, federal environmental violations, and my personal favorite, theft from an agricultural operation, which carried enhanced penalties because Colorado takes water rights seriously. Vivienne's designer wardrobe wasn't going to help her in federal court. But here's what nobody expected: the community reaction. You'd think Willowbrook Estates residents would be angry at me. After all, I'm the one who shut off their water. But human beings have a funny relationship with truth. When you show people they've been victimized, they don't usually attack the messenger. They attack the victimizer. On October 8th, a woman named Jennifer Park knocked on my door. Mid-40s, teacher at Pinewood Elementary, mother of 2 kids I'd seen playing in the valley. She held a casserole dish and looked nervous. "Mr. Stone, I'm Jennifer. I live at 2847 Meadowview Lane. I wanted to apologize and bring you dinner. It's lasagna, my grandmother's recipe." I was stunned. "Ma'am, you don't need to apologize. You didn't know what was happening. But we should have known. We should have asked questions. Where was our water coming from? Why were our bills so low? We just accepted it because it was convenient." She handed me the casserole, still warm. "What Vivienne did to you was horrible. The citations, the harassment, the false reports. Tommy Martinez told us everything at the meeting. You had every right to shut us down." "I wasn't trying to hurt your family, Jennifer. I was trying to stop being stolen from. I know. That's why half the neighborhood wants to thank you for exposing this before it got worse. The other half is still angry, but they'll come around when they realize you saved us from being accessories to federal crimes. Over the next week, I received 14 more casseroles, 6 pies, 3 dozen cookies, and enough thank you notes to fill a shoebox. Not from everyone, some residents remained resentful, but from enough people that I realized something important. Most humans are decent when they understand the truth. The new HOA president, elected in an emergency vote on October 15th, was a retired teacher named Margaret Chen, no relation to the forensic accountant. She came to visit me on a Thursday afternoon with homemade cookies and an apology on behalf of the community that felt both genuine and heavy with responsibility. Mr. Stone, most of us had no idea what Vivienne was doing. We just wanted to live in peace, enjoy the mountains, raise our families. We never questioned where the water came from because the bills seemed reasonable and nobody told us to worry. She sat on my porch, looking out at the valley where portable toilets still dotted the landscape. We're connecting to Pinewood Springs Municipal Water. It's costing us $4.7 million, about $23,500 per household. Some people are angry about the cost, but I keep reminding them, this is what we should have paid in 2009. We're just 15 years late. When will you be connected? March, if everything goes smoothly. Until then, we're making do with water trucks and portable facilities. It's humbling, honestly. Makes you appreciate infrastructure you usually take for granted. Margaret, I want you to know something. I didn't shut off the water to punish families. I shut it off to stop theft and expose fraud. Those are different things. She nodded. I know, and most people understand that now. Vivienne created this mess, and you ended it. That's not villainy, Mr. Stone. That's justice. Is there anything we can do to make this right? She asked, and I could tell the question came from genuine concern, not legal maneuvering. I thought about Sarah's roses blooming every June, about Grandpa Jackson striking that aquifer in 1967, believing he was providing for his family forever, about 40 acres of Colorado heaven that 3 generations of Stones had protected from people who thought proximity meant ownership. Keep your new board honest, treat your neighbors with respect, and maybe remember that the old guy with the worn-out barn has been here longer than your development and has every right to keep living his life without harassment. That's all I ever wanted. She smiled, relief washing over her face. We will. And Mr. Stone, thank you for not being vindictive. You could have destroyed us. Ma'am, I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped being stolen from. There's a difference. My settlement with Willowbrook Estates HOA was reached on November 15th, mediated by a federal judge who made it clear that the HOA was lucky I wasn't pursuing the maximum $4.9 million. The agreement, full payment of $2,347,892 plus court costs, paid through a combination of the HOA's emergency reserves, special assessments, insurance settlements, and personal liability claims against Vivienne and Richard Pemberton. The money arrived in my account on December 3rd. After taxes and legal fees, I had $1.8 million, more money than I'd ever had in my life. Money I'd never wanted but had earned through 15 years of patience and documentation. I didn't keep all of it. Sarah had always believed in giving back. When cancer took her, the last thing she said to me was, "Make sure something good grows from the hard times, Garrett. That's how you honor struggle." On December 10th, I donated $400,000 to the Colorado Water Conservation Fund in Sarah's name, the Sarah Stone Memorial Fund for Agricultural Water Rights Protection. It would help small farmers and ranchers defend their water rights against exactly the kind of theft I'd experienced. Another $100,000 went to the Pinewood Volunteer Fire Department, which had responded to a barn fire at my property 6 years ago and saved Grandpa's tractor and most of his tools. They bought a new engine and named it Stone 1, with a little plaque thanking my contribution. I put $200,000 into a college fund for my nephew's kids, Tommy's grandchildren, because Tommy had always supported me, and family takes care of family. The rest I invested, following Sarah's practical advice to make sure I had security for my later years, but not so much money that it changed who I was. Vivienne Blackwood's trial began on February 12th in Denver Federal Court. I attended 3 days of testimony, not for revenge, but for closure. Watching her sit at the defense table in a prison jumpsuit instead of a designer suit, her perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal, and her expression defeated, It wasn't satisfying the way I'd imagined. It was just sad. The prosecution laid out the case methodically: the illegal tap installation, the 15 years of theft, the shell companies, the fake consulting fees, the systematic fraud. They called Patricia Rodriguez, who testified about the water theft, with the clinical precision of an expert witness who documented every gallon. They called Sarah Chen, who walked the jury through financial records showing exactly where the money went. They called me on day 3, and I testified about Grandpa's, about 15 years of documentation, about the harassment and citations that had finally pushed me to act. The defense tried to argue that Vivienne believed she had rights to the water through some implied easement. The prosecutor destroyed that argument with my photographs of the illegal tap buried on my property and county records showing 0 legal agreements. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all 14 counts. Sentencing came on March 8th. The federal judge, a stern woman named Patricia Blackburn, who'd been on the bench for 23 years, didn't mince words. Ms. Blackwood, you orchestrated a fraud scheme that victimized both Mr. Stone and the 200 families of Willowbrook Estates. You stole natural resources during a drought emergency, endangering an aquifer that serves agricultural needs beyond your personal enrichment. You harassed a man who was your victim, attempting to silence him through false citations and false police reports. Your actions represent a stunning betrayal of the trust given to HOA board members and a callous disregard for both property rights and environmental stewardship. She sentenced Vivienne to 15 years in federal prison, $2.1 million in restitution orders, and permanent prohibition from serving on any HOA board, property management position, or position of fiduciary trust. Richard Pemberton received 12 years and lost his development license in 3 states. I didn't celebrate. I just drove home to my 40 acres, where Luna waited on the porch and Sarah's roses were beginning their spring growth. Willowbrook Estates finally connected to Pinewood Springs Municipal Water in March, at a cost of $4.7 million split among the homeowners, about $23,500 each. The installation took 6 weeks, with trenchers tearing up roads and sidewalks, orange cones lining every street, and the constant smell of diesel fuel and fresh-turned earth. The contrast with their silent theft from my well couldn't have been more perfect. What they'd stolen quietly for 15 years now required jackhammers, excavators, and public construction that everyone could see. Their property values dropped 18% when the fraud scandal hit the news. The Denver Post ran a full feature: Luxury Development Built on Stolen Water. How HOA Fraud Cost Residents Millions. Colorado Public Radio did a 3-part series. The story went national when CNN picked it up for a segment on HOA corruption. Every article mentioned Willowbrook Estates by name. Every prospective buyer would Google the development and find the scandal. The financial hit was real and lasting, but again, that was the cost of building luxury on theft. I watched the transformation from my porch over the following months. The portable toilets finally disappeared in April. Lawns stayed brown through summer. Most residents opted for drought-resistant xeriscaping, rather than paying for the water needed to maintain those emerald lawns. The decorative fountains were dismantled, too expensive to run on municipal water rates. Willowbrook Estates looked different now. More honest, maybe. Less artificially perfect. More like it belonged in Colorado, instead of pretending to be something it wasn't. On the anniversary of the water shutoff, September 16th, 1 year later, Margaret Chen organized something unexpected, a community acknowledgement event, not a celebration, but a recognition of what had happened and a commitment to doing better. She invited me. I almost didn't go, but Luna needed a walk, and I figured I owed it to the residents who'd apologized to at least show my face. 200 people attended, families I'd never met, elderly couples, young professionals, all gathered in the community center that used to be Vivienne's kingdom. Margaret spoke first. A year ago, our water stopped, and while that day was difficult, very difficult, it was also the day we learned the truth about how our community was built. Mr. Stone didn't create that crisis. He ended one that had been invisible for 15 years, and I want to publicly thank him for having the patience to document the theft and the courage to stop it, even though he knew it would cause hardship. People applauded, not everyone. I could see some faces that remained resentful, but enough that the sound filled the room and felt genuine. Then something happened that I wasn't prepared for. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, walked up to the front with his mother's encouragement. He looked nervous, clutching a piece of paper. "Mr. Stone," he said, his voice small but clear. "My name is Lucas Park. I'm Jennifer's son. We learned about water rights in school because of what happened. And I wanted to say thank you for teaching us that even when people are mean to you, you can do the right thing without being mean back." He handed me the paper. It was a drawing, a crayon sketch of my barn, my well house, and what I realized after a moment was Luna sitting on the porch. At the top, in careful child's handwriting, "Thank you for the water lesson." I had to clear my throat before I could speak. "Lucas, you're welcome, and you learned the right lesson. It's not about being mean, it's about standing up for what's yours and letting the truth do the work." After the event, as people milled around with cookies and coffee, several residents approached me. Jim Morrison, the accountant who'd first exposed the financial fraud, shook my hand with both of his. "Garrett, I've lived in 6 different communities with HOAs. This scandal was the best thing that ever happened to Willowbrook, even though it hurt. We have real oversight now, transparent finances, board members who actually serve the community instead of using it. You gave us that." An elderly woman named Dorothy Chong, who lived near the valley's southern edge, touched my arm gently. "Mr. Stone, my husband passed away 3 years ago. The week after, Vivienne cited me for my grief garden, said my forget-me-nots violated aesthetic standards. I've hated her ever since. Thank you for making sure people like that don't win forever." These conversations, these small moments of human connection, meant more than the settlement money. They meant the community understood, or at least most of it did. As summer turned to fall, I noticed changes in how Willowbrook residents treated my property. Where before they'd viewed my farm as an eyesore that needed fixing, now they waved when they drove by. Kids asked their parents about the man with the well. Joggers on the county road would call out, "Morning, Mr. Stone," and mean it. In October, Margaret approached me with an idea. "Mr. Stone, we're updating our community bylaws. We want to include a section on respecting adjacent properties and historical land rights. Would you be willing to consult on the language? We'll pay you, of course." "Keep your money, Margaret, but yes, I'll help. Just promise me the new bylaws include real consequences for board members who abuse their authority." "Already drafted. Every board member serves a maximum 2-year term. All financial records are public and audited quarterly by an independent firm. Harassment of any resident, inside or outside the HOA, is grounds for immediate removal and potential legal action." We learned our lesson. The bylaws passed with 94% approval in November. Willowbrook Estates had transformed from a cautionary tale about HOA tyranny into a model for accountability and transparency. Other HOAs started contacting Margaret, asking how they'd restructured. She created a template and shared it freely. My life returned to a new normal, a better normal in some ways. The pressure in my well stabilized at its natural 47 gallons per minute. Sarah's roses bloomed more vigorously than they had in years, whether from the improved water pressure or from some cosmic sense that justice had been served, I couldn't say. Luna got older, gray creeping into her muzzle, but she still greeted every morning with tail wags and enthusiasm. We took our walks at sunrise, just like always, watching the valley wake up in honest ways now. I started a consulting practice, not because I needed the money, but because other rural landowners started calling. "Mr. Stone, my water pressure's dropping. Mr. Stone, I think someone's tapping my well. Mr. Stone, the HOA next door is making threats." I helped them document. I helped them understand their rights. I connected them with attorneys and water inspectors. I became, without planning to, an advocate for property rights and water justice. Sarah would have been proud. On the 4th anniversary of Sarah's death, I planted a new rosebush in her garden, a variety called Constant Comment, deep red with a spicy scent, vigorous and hardy. The kind of rose that thrives in Colorado and doesn't need artificial help. As I watered it with well water that tasted like hope and tasted like justice, I thought about everything that had happened. 15 years of patience, 3 months of chaos, a settlement that funded conservation work, a community transformed, a tyrant imprisoned, a family of fraudsters brought to justice. Was it worth it? The stress, the harassment, the anger? Yes. Because patience isn't weakness, documentation isn't paranoia, and standing up for what's yours isn't vengeance, it's responsibility. These days, life's back to normal. Luna and I take morning walks around the property, her old bones moving slower, but her spirit still bright. The roses bloom every summer, red as Sarah's memory, fed by water that belongs to them. The well produces 47 gallons per minute of the sweetest water in 3 counties, all of it flowing to property that earned it through 3 generations of honest work. Sometimes I see Willowbrook Estates residents at the hardware store or the grocery. Most of them nod politely. Some stop to chat. A few still look resentful, like I'm the villain in their story instead of the victim who finally fought back. But that's okay. People believe what they need to believe to sleep at night. What's your worst HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else going through the same battle. Hit that subscribe button if you love seeing bullies get what they deserve, and ring that notification bell for more HOA Revenge Stories, where justice is served ice cold. Remember, sometimes standing up to neighborhood tyrants doesn't just save yourself, it saves everyone around you. When good people refuse to be intimidated by fake authority, entire communities can break free from fear. Thanks for watching HOA Revenge Stories.